At the machine, I'll start with the zipper panels. So we've cut 2 of these. Again, pattern matching doesn't matter with the zipper panels because the entire zipper placket is hidden as the cushion tucks into the chair. And we've cut 2 strips that are 4 inches tall by the full width of the fabric. I'm not going to worry about the length of the zipper at this point either. I'm simply going to fold one of the panels in half and stitch it to the zipper. You can stitch it from either side, either this side or that side. I usually like to go top down so that I can see what my finished top stitch is looking like. Leave a little tail of the zipper at the top, and then we'll stitch, connecting the pieces together. Now, even though the welt foot is in, I'm not going to actually use the groove of the welt foot. Instead, I'm taking the skinny side of the foot, and that's going to butt up to the teeth. And my fold is going to hit the far side of the teeth, and then once it's stitched, it'll pull back to the center. So I line it to the far side, puppet hand grip so that all layers stay together, like that. And this top stitching. It's good to have your stitch length set to about 4. Anywhere between 4 and 5 is a good stitch length for the walking foot machine. Anything closer than that, and you're just puncturing the fabric because the needle is so thick. So a close stitch is actually less secure, it damages the fabric. But between 4 and 5, nice long stitch is a very strong connection. And I can see here, no puckers, no pulls, just a nice even top stitch. It's good to pause every once in a while and make sure that you're aligning these cut edges and you're at the halfway point here at this fold. I don't typically pre-press this. I just find it's manageable enough at the machine, and I don't typically have the iron out when I'm doing slip covers. So that would be a wasted step. You'll find it's easy enough to align things with a soft fold here at the teeth, and that often gives even a tighter coverage, tighter closure here at the teeth because you haven't pressed it flat. Those two will butt up together and have a nice soft close. Now for down the other side, same technique, fold in half, and as I'm applying, I just want to make sure there's even tension on everything, and I like the folds to kiss and rise up just a little bit, so if it pulls back, it ends up flattening out. You can see here, that's nice coverage, and it's a nice, even, strong stitch. Pleased with that? And now I can add the pull. Here's a tip for adding the pull after the fact. I like to open up the zipper slightly and cut the teeth out of one side. So I leave the tab on one side, I'll leave it on the right side for this, but I'm going to cut the teeth out of maybe the first inch. Of the zipper. And then I'll add the pull face down. And align it so that the freshly cut edge of the teeth is right across from the entry point on the pull. Now here's the big tip. Instead of just pushing it up in, open up your zipper a little bit farther and then push it in at a right angle. So we've opened it up and I'm going to push it in at a right angle. You can sometimes even hear one click. Grab both tails and pull. And it goes right on. I'm going to run the pull just somewhat to the middle. There we have it. We've completed the zipper placket. Nice sturdy stitch. I've used a number 4.5 zipper chain. This one happens to be from Rolly Company. You could also use a number 5, but anything 4.5 or larger is sturdy enough for a cushion. I also tend to buy the zipper chain on rolls and then buy the pulls in bulk. So this is just a tan zipper slide that fits the 4.5 chain. Now before we stitch the layers together, I'd like to go ahead and make the connection between the front panel and the zipper placket. It is good habit to get into to always be stitching from the wrong side of the fabric down, just like we did when we applied the welt. So when we apply the boxing, we'll be going from this orientation as well, which means we'll want to start up here just before the corners that really matter. This is the most important corner as it heads into the pattern matched area. So we'll start our stitching here, we'll go all the way around, and then I'd like to continue on with the zipper placket. So I might as well just go ahead and connect these two here and serge them to clean them up. And you can go right over the nylon zipper teeth without issue. I don't like how square that is. Let me fix that. Better. Okay, so now I have the connection between the zipper placket and the front boxing. No worries about pattern matching there. And I'm going to run this through the serger so that we got a nice clean edge on the inside of our cushion. Now back at the walking foot machine, we're going to wrap the boxing really tightly around these corners to get the starting point. Usually put my finger in the corner and push out and wrap tightly so that that's the exact distance we'll need when we actually stitch. And then I'm going to follow the inside edge here. And then I don't even need a pin. That's going to be my starting point. And just like applying welt, we keep the boxing straight and we manipulate the top layer. And I can see my previous stitch in the welt application, which is wonderful because that will allow me to make sure this stitch is just on the inside of it. Okay. When you're doing corners, sometimes it's nice to pull the boxing strip up so that you're staying on a straight line for the boxing strip. Now this area is easy because it's already got the double stick tape, so it's not going anywhere, so I can just glide along. I still do grip in the back and a puppet hand in the front too. Make sure no puckers and pulls get caught in. And now as I'm approaching the next corner, keep in mind this technique. Keep the boxing strip straight towards you and manipulate the top of the cushion to keep a 3/4 inch stitch going down this way. So I'm going to keep a 3/4 inch stitch there, and I'll manipulate the top to match. So I'm not really turning the stitch at all. I'm just manipulating the top to keep going on my 3/4 seam allowance. See, this is staying straight. I'm imagining staying on that stitch line, and I will, instead of trying to turn my stitch, instead of manipulating the top to make a corner while maintaining this straight 3/4 seam allowance on the boxing. Now as I'm headed into the zipper strip, I'm going to tuck my seam allowance back towards away from the zipper placket. And then stitch down on top. And now we're approaching another corner. I think I'm going to increase my stitch length to closer to 5 because I feel it kind of gripping, so we'll go ahead a little larger with a stitch that allows us to move a little more quickly. Yeah. There's our 3/4, kind of eyeballing. That's the direction I'm headed with my sewing. Manipulating the top layer. Let's check our work. So what we're looking for is a nice unpuckered top, and then with the boxing we're hoping for 3/4 inch seam allowance just straight around, and we did pretty well. If you didn't at this point, like if it's going wonky and your stitch is going through the boxing at an angle, then go back and rip and fix that right now, because it's not going to get any better as you go. So you want to make sure you've taken care of and made those corners really good as you went. It's important not to pull on one layer or the other. Just, you know, make sure you've got no puckers, line them up together, and proceed. Okay, I'm at a corner. I'm aiming for this straight line right there. I'll draw it again just to visualize. And then I'm going to match this stitch with that by manipulating the top piece. Okay, and now I'm approaching where I started, my start point. Now, some upholsterers create a little pocket, a little housing, garage for the zipper pull. In this cushion, I think I'm going to just put a straight seam because I'm worried that the pocket is going to have so much bulk, because this is heavy fabric, so much bulk that it's going to pinch in on the side of the slipcover. So instead of creating the pocket for the zipper housing, I'm going to instead just mark the placement right there. I think I like that. So I can make little marking. That's what I want to line up. And I'll go ahead and stitch those two layers together, serge it off, and then come back. I do want to make sure that the pull is not hanging out here. Okay, it's on the inside, so we're good there. Good stitch, square, straight across. I'll trim off this excess and run it through the serger. I think I'm pleased with that. Let's check our corners. The front edge. With cut up dot pattern, it's funny, but it doesn't look pattern matched, but in fact it is. There's the weird cut up dot that's right at that seam line. But we're in good shape. And then let's also, at this stage, it's a good idea to remove the double stick tape so that you don't run the risk of leaving it in when you go to serge the cushion. So as soon as I do this stitch, I remove the double stick tape. It would just do a number on the serger if we kept it in there by mistake. Our next step is to align the bottom of the cushion and stitch it to the boxing. There is a challenge, especially for beginners, to get nice square corners. There's a tendency for things to get a little skewed or puckered around the corners, and so I'll share a couple tips to help alleviate those problems. The first thing I usually do is find the corner, the front corner, because that's the one that matters, these two front corners, this one and this one. And I'll pull out the point of the corner and line up the seam allowances, and then come across and make a marking or a snip. If you make a marking, that works very well. The other thing you can do, and I like to do, is make just a little notch. That works too. But on some fabrics, a marker might be more noticeable. You do have to be careful with notches that you don't go too deep. This isn't a relief cut. This is just a notch for marking the corner. And if you did a deep relief cut, you've got a chance of going too deep and having a hole in the corner right there. So there's the front. I will mark the corner of the T. So square that off, make a little notch. And then on this side, which is the other front corner that really matters, find the corner, make it sharp, line up my cut edges to square it off, small notch. And the other one, back of the T. And then I'll do the 2 in the zipper panels in the back as well. There's the sharp turn, squaring it off, small notch to mark. Square off the corner, follow to the side, and mark. So that's one quick tip to improve how the corners line up to each other. Okay, and then let me get back. It's also a good idea to start your project along the side just before the corners that matter. These are the 2 corners that matter most. That notch aligning with this. It's a really important corner. This notch aligning with this one, and I'm going to swing up here and start just before that corner. And just as before, I'm trying to keep my boxing straight, and I'm manipulating the top layer, which in this case is the bottom of the cushion, to align exactly to that seam allowance. And if I did things correctly, then directly across from this stitch would be my notch for my turn, and there it is. So I'm manipulating the top, and I'm approaching this other notch, which should be aligned directly across from my stitch 3/4 of an inch in, and it does. So there's the notch, there's the stitch, and exactly in line with each other. So I can go straight 3/4 inch in. When I get to that corner, I'm not turning the stitch. My stitch is straight. I am instead manipulating the layer with welt. Once you've successfully made this front corner, you can stitch down a little bit and then go all the way to this end and make sure that your notch is going to line up to the turn of this corner. So I'm going to place the notch there. I'm going to pinch it with my fingers. See that? I've got the notch. There's the corner. There's the notch. I'm going to grab that, pinch that, and then make sure that nothing shifts as I get all the way to that corner. I can just now worry about seam allowance alignment. And sometimes you need to grip here and grip here. I used to tell my students that making cushions is an upper body workout, and it should be. You're in control of it. You're manipulating everything to work the way you like. It's not like quilt sewing where you can just let the machine do its work and gently push things through. You're manipulating the layers, you're gripping things in a way that they won't shift. And that's the best way to eliminate puckers and folds. Now I'm approaching the corner. If I lift this up again, that notch is in fact directly across from this welt stitch. Perfect. So I'll walk it around. And then this notch directly across from this stitch. If it's not, take your project off the machine, figure out what went wrong. Did something gather up? Did something, maybe your notches weren't placed well? Figure out what's wrong and then rip out and stitch that part again. It's not going to improve the more you get into the project. So you really, if those corners aren't lining up, you need to stop and go back right at that moment. I finished with that inside curve. Now I want to make sure that we're going to align all the way to the next corner. So here's the next corner, and here's the notch. Let's line those up, pinch there. And then when we pull on all the layers, that'll work things out. The notch is across from the stitch. And I'm shooting for this notch, matching to that corner. It's looking good. And if your corners have lined up, then this should just fold back. And we're just approaching it and connecting it. Okay, and now I'm beyond my start point, and I can do a little back tack. And there we have a completed tea cushion with a 3-inch boxing strip. Let's run it through the serger to clean up the edges. Now this is a lot of bulk to run through a serger, but you'll find that in the areas that are super lumpy, if you trim those back so that the blade does not need to cut through those areas, you'll have fewer needle breaks, fewer issues. The other thing you can do, if your fabric is just too heavy for your serger, you can before you put the pieces, the top and the boxing together. You can serge those pieces separately. I like to do that only as a last resort because that's twice the amount of serging. And then on the corners, I used to just run off and then run back on, making sure all the while that I don't have my boxing strip caught up in there. That would be disastrous. Check our corners. Now when we stuff the cushion, we're going to have our seam allowance bent up from the bottom and down from the top so that it's pushed into the boxing rather than resting on the shaped part of the cushion. We don't need relief cuts if we apply the cushion that way, and also you'll end up with nice sharp corners if you keep your seam allowance pushed towards the boxing. I think I'm pleased with that. Let's see how it looks stuffed. I like to remove the old cover rather than adding the slip cover on top of it. You'll just get a better cushion look. So sometimes these original cushion covers are pretty nasty. Now if the foam is in good shape, and it is, I might just add fresh upholstery batting. I think that's what we're gonna do. We'll give this batting a rest. Yeah, that makes sense because the foam is actually in pretty good shape. It's not showing any signs of dry rot, still got good spring. So we'll just freshen it up a bit with a new layer of batting. This batting is 1 inch bonded Dacron. I think this happens to be from Rolly Company, but any upholsterer supply will do. It's good to make sure that you wrap the batting so that you don't have any seams in the batting on the front edge. So I'll cut enough to wrap this direction. There we go, I like that. Wrap, wrap, wrap. And then I'll use a handheld stapler with 1/4 inch staples to secure it to itself. So I'm pinching in and putting a staple about every inch. And the staple's right up against the corner of the foam. So like that. Staple, staple. So it's on rather tightly, and it's a lot of staples. And we'll leave those staples in. But we will get rid of the bulk trimming the batting about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch away from the staples. And as long as that connection is at a place where there's welt cord, it will be completely hidden. It won't be lumpy at all. Especially with the T-cushion, it's advantageous to have the zipper come down at least halfway down the sides. It makes it so much easier to stuff. You can really position these corners, get in there and find those spots before we zipper up. And as we discussed before, we're pushing the seam allowance down to the boxing from the top and up from the bottom. So it's in the boxing, not resting on top of the cushion or on the bottom of the cushion. That'll create sharper corners. And that will eliminate our need to do any sort of relief cuts. Pushing the seam allowance to the boxing also helps lift the pull away from the batting so it doesn't get tangled up in the batting. And since we didn't create a housing for the zipper pull, just fold it back and tuck it in neatly. We've got nice overlap, so it will remain hidden. All right, let's check out our work. We have nice square corners. Our welt is nice and even, little dog ears at these corners. Zipper, not pattern matched, but looks beautiful. And we are ready to start with the rest of the slipcover.